Your kidneys are the foundation of good health and longevity, and in this video, I'll go over daily habits that seem to be harmless, but they're actually damaging your kidneys. And it's important to identify this early and stop them, as it's hard to reverse kidney damage once the disease sets in. And without proper functioning kidneys, our bodies will have a hard time performing even the basic functions like filtering waste and regulating electrolytes and controlling blood pressure and even producing vital hormones. I'm Dr. Leonid Kim. I'm board certified in internal and obesity medicine. And on this channel, I'll go over the most up-to-date and evidence-based information on topics of weight loss, metabolic health, longevity. Let's get into it. So the first habit that is harming your kidneys is not drinking enough water. And good hydration is absolutely critical for good kidney health. Water helps us flush out toxins and it helps prevent kidney stones. And if you don't drink enough water, you increase your risk of developing urinary tract infections. And there was a large Canadian study that showed that higher urine volume, which we get from drinking more water, predicted a slower renal decline over 6 years of follow-up. And there was another study, which was a huge cross-sectional analysis based on NHANES data, that showed that higher total water intake, particularly plain water, had a potentially protective effect on the kidneys. Now, how much water should you drink per day? Well, the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine determined that the adequate daily fluid intake is about 15.5 cups or 3.7 liters of fluids for men, and it's about 11.5 cups or 2.7 liters of fluids for women. Now, this recommendation covers not just water, but other beverages, as well as fluid we get from food. But this is just a general goal, and some people need a lot more, depending on how much you exercise or the type of work that you do. And some people may need a higher fluid intake if they live in hot climates or if they live in higher altitudes. And in some cases, you may actually need to be careful not to take too much water, especially if you're suffering from high blood pressure or advanced kidney disease or heart failure. So talk to your doctor about how much water you should drink, as your situation may be different depending on your overall health. The next habit that is damaging your kidneys is not getting enough good quality sleep. A good night's rest is extremely important for your overall health, but it's especially important for your kidneys. And your kidneys actually work in sync with your circadian rhythm, which is the natural 24-hour cycle of your body. So during sleep, your kidney activity slows down to conserve energy and maintain fluid balance. But if we experience sleep deprivation, or if we get low quality sleep, well, then that disrupts the delicate rhythm of kidneys' workload, which then in turn causes inflammation and oxidative stress and kidney damage. In fact, we have a study published in the Journal of Clinical Sleep Medicine that followed over 190,000 participants over 20 years, and it found that a poor sleep profile is associated with an increased risk of chronic kidney disease. Okay, the next habit that is slowly damaging your kidneys is eating too much salt. And too much salt can lead to high blood pressure, which is one of the most common causes of chronic kidney disease in the US. And we have systematic review of 47 studies on dietary salt that showed that salt intake had adverse effects on health outcomes like blood pressure and kidney function, and death due to kidney disease. And a more recent Cochrane review found high certainty evidence that salt reduction reduced blood pressure in people with chronic kidney disease. It also resulted in reduced albuminuria, which is a measure of how much protein is lost in the urine, which is a clinical marker of kidney disease. So it's incredibly important to lower your salt intake to preserve kidney health, especially since estimated that 90% of Americans aged 2 years or older eat too much sodium. Now, the easiest way to cut back is to focus on the particular foods that are high in sodium. And in fact, 44% of the sodium we eat comes from these 10 types of food shown over here. So it's things like pizza and sandwiches and cheese, pasta dishes, breads and rolls, as well as cold cuts and cured meats. And as a general rule, it helps to choose fresh foods over processed foods. In fact, there are studies that found that those who eat a lot of processed foods had a 24% higher risk of kidney disease. So it helps to minimize processed foods. And another easy way to cut back on salt is to replace salt seasonings with herbs and spices And you can also use things like fresh lemons or lime or vinegar to boost the flavor. Next is you need to be careful with taking too many painkillers, and specifically drugs like NSAIDs or non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs like Advil and ibuprofen. These drugs work by blocking the production of prostaglandins, which are natural chemicals that dilate blood vessels and increase blood flow to the kidneys. So if you block the blood flow to the kidneys, you cause acute stress, which can lead to fluid retention and high blood pressure, which then in turn will cause even more damage to the kidneys. And I would especially be careful with NSAIDs if you have diabetes or if you take blood pressure medications, as it wouldn't take much to shift that delicate balance and stress the kidneys to the point of damage. Another habit that is very damaging to your kidneys is smoking. Now, we all know that smoking is not good for your lungs or your heart or your blood pressure, but smoking is also very damaging to your kidneys. And we have data from over 10,000 people that found that smoking leads to a decrease or a worsening of renal function. And smoking is considered an independent risk factor for chronic kidney disease. And it's not just cigarette smoking that we need to worry about. Vaping or using e-cigarettes is probably just as toxic to our kidneys. And we have animal data that shows that nicotine-containing e-vapor increases things like inflammation, and it increases oxidative stress-induced DNA injury, and it causes mitochondrial dysfunction, which ultimately leads to the activation of fibrotic signaling in mice who are fed a high-fat diet. So we get more inflammation and accelerated development of renal fibrosis, which later leads to long-term kidney disease. The next habit that is damaging your kidneys is sitting still or having a desk job where you don't get a lot of movement. And there was a study that was published in the American Journal of Kidney Disease that looked at over 500 adults with advanced kidney disease, and it showed that people that exercise regularly and maintain higher levels of physical activity had about a 50% lower risk of death from any cause compared to those who didn't. And if you already have kidney disease, check out this video over here where I talk about the best foods to reverse kidney damage. I hope this was helpful, and I'll see you in the next one.